This is all turning out to be a lot larger than any of us.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're talking about the shocking true story of Amsterdam.
I have to be careful. I saw something terrible. Is somebody watching me? I don't know if I can talk about this.
For this video, we're exploring the story and conspiracy at the center of David O. Russell's period mystery film. This means a few spoilers. What did you think of Amsterdam? Let us know in the comments. A lot of this actually happened. Amsterdam opens with this statement, but a lot and actually should be emphasized. The film centers on a doctor with a glass eye, an African-American lawyer, and a nurse who uses shrapnel pulled from soldiers to create art.
You don't get here without things starting a long time ago.
This trio forms a friendship in Amsterdam during World War I. While these three are essentially fictional, Christian Bale's Bert Berenson is based on a real officer named Dr. Shields. Bale and David O. Russell looked at pictures from this era of people partying, wondering what their stories were.
Why would you possibly think that was us?
Well, there's not too many people that fit the description of a doctor looking for his eye on the ground with his black attorney.
Columbia Law School.
According to Russell, they, quote, took some recorded history that's explosive and fascinating, then invented our own friendship of those who were never really recorded. The filmmakers also drew inspiration from Bale's grandmother, who lived every day to the fullest throughout the Blitz. Butler and the Bonus Army. Returning to New York, the three friends catch wind of a conspiracy to overthrow President Franklin D. Roosevelt and replace him with a fascist dictator.
As an organization, we want to rule the world.
This plot takes various liberties, including one involving the murders of a senator and his daughter.
Got a dead white man in a box. Not even a casket. Doesn't even have a top on it.
At its core, though, the story is grounded in a real conspiracy known as the business plot. In 1932, roughly 17,000 World War I veterans and another 26,000 demonstrators arrived in Washington, D.C., struggling to provide for their families and themselves due to the Great Depression. These veterans wanted to redeem service bonus certificates they got from 1924's World War Adjusted Compensation Act. They couldn't cash the certificates until 1945, however. The Bonus Army, as the press called them, set up camp.
They camp out in tents and hastily erected shacks. Some of the veterans take over condemned buildings. The police evict them by force. The veterans dig in, vowing to stay until they get the bonus.
After protesting veterans William Hushka and Eric Carlson died in a police shooting, President Herbert Hoover ordered General Douglas MacArthur to drive the marchers out of the campsite.
And without warning, began hurling gas grenades at the veterans. The troops advanced, some jabbing with bayonets.
Although the Bonus Army had lost this battle, they gained a couple of powerful allies. General Smedley Butler appeared at the demonstration before Hoover called in the troops. During the 1932 presidential election, Butler supported Democratic candidate Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Bonus Army and the deaths of the two veterans hurt Hoover's shot at re-election, paving Roosevelt's road to victory.
On November 8, 1932, Americans, desperate for change, elected Franklin Delano Roosevelt president.
Roosevelt also resisted the Bonus Army's demands, but he took a different approach when another march occurred in 1933.
Still, the veterans kept returning to Washington each year.
FDR knows that he cannot use force against the veterans. He also knows he doesn't want them in Washington, D.C.
Rather than send the army, FDR sent First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt to connect with the protesters. Through the Civilian Conservation Corps, Roosevelt offered the veterans jobs, with many accepting the deal. While Roosevelt vetoed giving the $2 billion bonuses early, Congress overrode this in 1936, with the veterans being paid almost a decade in advance.
It is vetoed again by President Roosevelt, but this time there's enough power in the House and Senate to override the veto.
The bonus bill becomes law, and veterans' tab on World War I is paid in full.
Roosevelt had other plans to revitalize the economy and create jobs through his New Deal.
During the first 100 days of his administration, Roosevelt signs into law a dizzying array of programs designed to stimulate the languishing economy.
Roosevelt also sought to cease the gold standard monetary system, making him an enemy in the eyes of the American Liberty League. an organization so conservative that even Hoover thought they were too far right.
It consisted on the whole of the very rich who thought the New Deal was going much, much too far. They were so conservative that Herbert Hoover refused to join, saying that their Wall Street model of liberty was not for him.
This group included the DuPont family, John J. Raskob of General Motors, Al Smith, who lost the Democratic presidential nomination to Roosevelt, and John W. Davis, who supported Roosevelt until the New Deal was introduced. It's just business. The League was allegedly part of a conspiracy to seize the White House from FDR. The Wall Street leaders at the top of this conspiracy sought to remodel the country after Hitler and his brown shirts, or Mussolini and his black shirts.
And there was curious interest in maybe bringing some features of Mussolini's regime, like the corporate state structure, to the United States.
There are those who believe that this fascist model is the key to U.S. economic recovery.
The U.S. was already forming extremist groups like the Silver Shirts. To lead this coup, the conspirators turned to the retired General Smedley Butler.
The men behind the plot to overthrow FDR see him as a charismatic leader and one that they will be able to control. But there is a great deal more to this complex man than the plotters could possibly know.
Although Butler had supported Roosevelt, he was still an immensely popular figure and had spent most of his life as a self-described racketeer for capitalism. Believing that Roosevelt's health was declining, the businessmen presented a scenario where the president appoints Butler as Secretary of General Affairs, a replacement for the Secretary of State. From there, Butler would assume almost absolute power.
They knew that if Smedley Butler set out to seize the White House, there was nothing that would have stopped him short of a bullet. But they didn't know that Smedley Butler would have stood in front of that White House defending it.
In Amsterdam, Robert De Niro plays General Gil Dillenbeck, a stand-in for Butler.
We need someone to help us to find the truth. My friend was killed because of something monstrous that he had seen.
Numerous liberties are again taken, including a climax where Dillenbeck is almost publicly assassinated on stage for speaking out. However, parts of Dillenbeck's storyline echo Butler's accounts of what happened. At his Pennsylvania residence, Butler was approached by Gerald C. McGuire, a bond salesman, World War I veteran, and commander for the Connecticut American Legion. Also present was William Doyle of the Massachusetts American Legion.
The general listens politely, but despite several appeals by the two legionnaires, he declares that he is not interested in becoming involved in American Legion politics.
McGuire offered Butler 500,000 ex-soldiers and full financial support to overtake the presidency, mapping out the far-fetched plan. Although Butler wasn't interested, McGuire remained persistent, wanting him to deliver a speech at an American Legion convention calling for the gold standard to be reinstated.
McGuire tries to convince Butler not only to attend the upcoming American Legion convention, but to deliver a speech McGuire shows him. It calls for a resolution demanding that the country return to the pre-New Deal gold standard.
Growing suspicious, Butler decided to unravel the conspiracy that would come to be known as the business plot.
Butler demands to know more about the people behind McGuire, insisting upon a direct meeting with the money men. McGuire agrees.
McGuire spent some time in Europe, collecting information on how to bring fascism to America. Upon returning, McGuire met with Butler a few more times. Butler also had meetings with Robert Clark, heir to the Singer sewing machine company fortune. Between McGuire and Clark, Butler found that many business giants were attached to the conspiracy, including John Davis, Al Smith, and the DuPont Corporation.
The people interested in pursuing this train of thought, or perhaps this action, went to Butler because they didn't really know him. They knew his public persona. They assumed that he would be anathema to some of the governmental changes that were going on.
The conspirators assumed Butler would keep quiet. Instead, Butler spoke with Paul Cumley French, a Philadelphia reporter and his former secretary.
So he felt that he needed this validation from another reputable source, and that's why he turned to the Philadelphia Record.
French broke the story through the Philadelphia Record and New York Post, although the New York Times called it a, quote, gigantic hoax. Butler reportedly told McGuire, quote, if you get 500,000 soldiers advocating anything smelling of fascism, I am going to get 500,000 more and lick the hell out of you, and we will have a real war right at home. Butler also confided in J. Edgar Hoover, still director of the FBI, who relayed information to Roosevelt. There were attempts to discredit Butler, with people claiming he was mentally ill.
The American Liberty League questions the sanity of General Smedley Butler.
There were the accusations that he was mentally unstable at the time.
Based on Butler's testimony, though, the Congressional Committee concluded that there were discussions of such a plot, and that it could have been put into effect.
There is no question but that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient.
Congressman John McCormick said, quote, "If General Butler had not been the patriot he was, and if they had been able to maintain secrecy, the plot certainly might very well have succeeded." Despite this, no charges were brought against the individuals singled out. Some names were excluded from the final report, the richest not even being called to testify. McGuire and the others accused denied the accusations against them.
McGuire acknowledges that he had met with General Butler on several occasions, but when questioned, he denies ever having conversations with Butler regarding European veterans organizations.
Roosevelt helped to conceal the testimony, supposedly fearing the public's reaction. Butler, who grew more critical of FDR, talked about his testimony in a 1935 newsreel, which is referenced in Amsterdam.
My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institution. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write.
His testimony would not see the light until journalist John Spivak released it in 1967. By that point, Butler had been dead for almost 27 years. McGuire died from pneumonia 5 years before Butler in 1935. Being under 40, McGuire's death was seen as mysterious, although his doctor believes stress from the accusations led to his pneumonia.
Gerald McGuire, the only witness who could have shed more light on the shadowy figures behind the plot, dies of natural causes at the age of 37.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Did this actually happen? Almost 90 years later, historians still debate how much of Butler's testimony was true, and if it was, how close was America to becoming a fascist nation?
One could speculate that if this fantastic plot to overthrow FDR had succeeded in 1934, the U.S. might well have allied itself with the fascist powers of Europe, and the outcome of World War II would have been decidedly different.
Rumors also continue to surface, including accusations that Prescott Bush, George H.W.'s father and W.'s grandfather, played a role, although some find this unlikely.
Prescott Bush was actually too much involved with the actual Nazi party in Germany to be involved with the business plot.
We'll never know what might have been, but if the business plot had worked, World War II would have paved the way for a much bleaker future. While we'd like to tell ourselves that the business plot could not happen today, the modern political landscape suggests otherwise.
A congressional investigation into the riot at the U.S. Capitol in January 2021 blames former President Donald Trump for what it describes as an attempted coup.
Amsterdam may be more fiction than fact, but the true story it unearths shows just how little politics and capitalism have changed in nearly a century. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.